Hello, welcome to my review of Mega Man 3, the game for the Nintendo Entertainment System from 1990. Before I get started, I want to go over my rubric for reviewing this game. I'll primarily be considering the modern fun factor of the game. How much fun is it to play, look at, and listen to today? I'll also consider the context in which the game exists, where it is in the modern gaming landscape and its history, and whether or not that context adds value to the game today. Lastly, I'll mention my nostalgia and personal bias towards the game and how much it factors into my ultimate review score. Let's get started with the modern fun factor for Mega Man 3. Mega Man 3 is a platformer shooter game, meaning that platforming and shooting are equally considered in the game's design and what you do as a player. Primarily, you are moving through levels that have obstacles that you have to jump over or around or on top of, and you have to use weapons to blast robot enemies. Both of these mechanics are very solid in Mega Man 3. Primarily, Mega Man just shoots wherever he is looking, which works great for the game, and his jump is very basic, but satisfyingly predictable. He can also short hop, which adds another degree of control to Mega Man. When running, Mega Man feels kind of slow, and he doesn't accelerate, he stays at a static speed, so he doesn't really feel like Mario or Sonic. The big new ability in Mega Man 3 is the ability to slide. The slide here briefly speeds up Mega Man when you press down and the jump button. The slide is fun and intuitive. It instantly makes sense and is a lot of fun to do. Running, jumping, shooting, and sliding come together as more than the sum of their parts, and really make Mega Man a fun, dynamic character to control. The design of the levels and the enemies, which I'll get into later, are catered around how much flexibility there is in your control of Mega Man in this game. Rush makes his first appearance in this game. He's Mega Man's sidekick dog, and he's quite charming and interesting. He replaces the platforming items from Mega Man 2, and I think this is a great design decision. The Rush coil is fun to place and used, and standing on Rush like he's a flying skateboard is really cool. Rush can also be turned into a mini submarine, which is fun to use, but overall underutilized in the game. All of the Rush abilities are finite, and they are refilled with the same item that Mega Man uses to refill his other weapons, so there's an element of strategy in their use. Overall, Rush is really fun to use and to look at, and he's a big improvement over the previous game's platforming items. And it's just very creative and exciting to play a game where you get to summon a robot dog to help you move through the levels. I do want to mention that technically I did cheese the flying skateboard Rush by jumping a lot while I was using him, but this was a fun way to get through the levels, and I don't think that the strategy negates too much of the challenge or level design. Speaking of, the level design in Mega Man 3 is really good. Throughout the game's levels, you primarily move through a couple types of areas. There are rough terrain areas where Mega Man needs to shoot and jump and platform, going from left to right for quite a while. Then there are single screen areas that function a bit more like problems or puzzles that you have to solve and get through. And there are longer open stretches that you need to get through a gauntlet of enemies, usually by moving quickly and dodging, and sometimes using the rush abilities. Most of these levels will factor the rush abilities to a certain level, and they all factor the slide mechanic into how you get through them. With the added degree of control comes a new level of difficulty. The designers really added much more obstacles and enemies into the game, and it just feels much more difficult than the previous Mega Man games. I'll elaborate more later in this review, but overall I think the difficulty in Mega Man 3 is a good thing. There's a lot of options for how you control Mega Man. As you gain more weapons, there's a lot of options for how you attack enemies, and the difficulty really makes the level design shine. The minor enemies in Mega Man 3 are a big step up in this game. Their placement, their behavior, and the way you can fight against them is really interesting. As I moved through the game, I felt like there were a lot of options in how I could get around the minor enemies, and the dodge mechanic really did add a whole new layer of gameplay. There's a lot of finesse in how Mega Man can use his dodge and jump to fight enemies, and overall I think the minor enemies in this game are really sophisticated and interesting, even by modern day standards. For example, there's a large ground enemy that represents a challenge in that he can slide along the ground and bump into Mega Man, but he also shoots homing missiles out of his head, and these homing missiles follow Mega Man with a slight delay, so you can jump and dodge the missiles and choose whether or not to attack him or attack the missiles, or use different weapons against them. There's a lot of options and it's really cool. Also, there are these pole vaulting enemies who pop up into the air and they just rush straight at Mega Man, and a well-timed dodge can actually get past their attack, and you might even bump into the pole vault that they use, so you gotta time it just right. But then these enemies, once they're on the other side of Mega Man, will come back at him. This is really interesting and dynamic enemy design, and I really liked how Mega Man 3 did this. There's a lot of challenging enemies in Mega Man 3, but Mega Man 3 seems to give you a lot of options in how you deal with them, so the difficulty doesn't feel stifling, but instead it feels challenging, and I really like that. Also, considering the visuals, Mega Man 3 is very charming. Many of the enemies are cool to look at and have their own unique designs. Now, there is a new key gameplay feature to mention here that is also a story feature. Breakman, or spoiler alert, Proto Man, as we learn at the end of the game, encounters Mega Man as a mini-boss in multiple levels. These fights are interesting and mysterious. A whistling noise will play right before you fight them, and then this Proto Man character will attack Mega Man using a jumping pattern that forces you to learn to use the slide. I thought this was a really great way of showing me, the player, how to use the slide mechanic and how necessary it would be to get through the game. And since these fights come up relatively early in the levels, there's not huge consequences for losing. As I touch on the story later in the Modern Fun Factor portion of this review, I'll say that these mini fights with Proto Man are both fun and add a new layer to the story when it all comes together at the end. The core 8 Robot Masters are also very cool and visually striking in this game. Each of their levels stands out, especially Snake Man's levels. The visuals here are stunning, and the moving floors that happen to be the body of giant robots that you are fighting are amazing even today. These giant snakes would stand out in most games, but in Mega Man 3, nearly all of the core 8 levels exude this level of imagination. Gemini Man's level is also really cool and has these cool crystals and weird egg things that house flying alien tadpole creatures. The crystals here actually remind me of Crystal Snail's level in Mega Man X, and I wonder if there's a lore connection. The boss fights here are also very good, and like the rest of the game, they do a particularly good job of incorporating the slide mechanic. I did use a guide to fight the bosses in the easiest order, and even then I found a challenge and excitement in fighting them. There's also good weapons that they give the player, particularly Shadow Man's ninja stars, Gemini Man's bouncing lasers, and the homing magnet weapons. Shadow Man's ninja stars in particularly are cool because they're similar to Metal Man's attack from Mega Man 2, but they're not as overpowered and I think more interesting to use. Though I do want to mention the power-up from Top Man was not very intuitive. I never really felt like I was using it right, and then occasionally I would just completely obliterate an enemy with it. I didn't really like Top Man's attack. After you fight the core 8 bosses, you get 4 more levels that are remixes of the previous levels. I don't particularly mind this decision because the new color layouts look cool, and there are some added enemies that are unique to this part of the game. In these levels, again, spoiler alert, you'll fight 2 Robot Masters, and these Robot Masters are returning Robot Masters from Mega Man 2 that are housed in the case of this new sinister-looking robot. I actually think it would have been more interesting for them to have just been themselves, rather than inside of this new design, but either way, this was a cool twist. Now, I don't hate these levels. They are not terrible. They're not like the turret room from Mega Man 2, but I will say that these 4 levels were the least fun part of the game for me, particularly because the difficulty here does not feel balanced. The difficulty in this game is a double-edged sword. If you watched my Mega Man 2 review, you know that I said that that game was too easy, and overall I feel that the added difficulty here is appreciated, but these 4 levels are particularly difficult and unbalanced with the rest of the game. These 4 levels are very long, and your checkpoint will stay at the beginning of the level until you beat the first Robot Master. And after you've beaten the first Robot Master, you still have a long way to go. During these 4 levels, the added difficulty doesn't feel very fun or well balanced. It just feels kind of like a slog. And then I begin to feel frustrated because these are remixes of those old levels, and even though the colors changing does look cool, I'm kind of ready to move on to the next portion of the game about halfway through these remix levels. Again, I don't want to say that they are bad or a total disaster. They're just less fun than the rest of the game, and I think they could have been trimmed down. After these, you'll have one more fight with Proto Man, where he gets a cool profile picture in the middle of the level select screen, and he's called Break Man, which is still mysterious and interesting. Then you get a quick cutscene with Dr. Light, and he talks about gathering elements, and Dr. Wily stealing Gamma, which is a giant robot that you'll fight at the end. This kind of came out of nowhere for me and didn't really mean much to me at the time because I didn't read the instruction manual before playing the game. Now, going into Dr. Wily's castle, and also really factoring into those 4 remix levels, resource management is a big factor in this game. And it is cool, as I mentioned in the previous Mega Man reviews, that resource management, for this time and this era of game design was a new and novel idea. And it's cool how you as the player can really manage the resources you have, whether that be energy tanks or other weapons or the platforming items, to really change how you approach the levels. And I think here it's even better done than it was in Mega Man 2. So Wily's Castle is back in this game, and overall this version is pretty good. The levels themselves are fun, and the art actually changes in interesting ways based on where you are in the castle overworld map. The low point in the castle is the clone Mega Man fight. Even after I beat the fight, I still didn't really understand how this was meant to be fun, or even really what I was supposed to do to really figure this one out. It wasn't a very good fight. It's nothing compared to the turret room in Mega Man 2, but it does seem kind of unfinished. There's also an underwater boss fight with a claw machine that drops turtles on you, and that fight was so-so. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. The Yellow Devil is back, and if you watched my Mega Man 1 review, you know that I love the Yellow Devil fight. And this fight is even more fun because it factors in the slide mechanic. Though I do want to say I liked the visual design of the Yellow Devil better in Mega Man 1. This one kind of has shoulder pads, and I didn't necessarily love it as much as the more rounded one in Mega Man 1. The final fight with Wily is really cool. It's a big set-piece battle where you fight this giant robot. It's not as good as the giant robot fights in Mega Man 2 with the giant Gutsman robot or the dragon, but still, it's really good, and I thought it was a really creative, cool fight, especially how you could hop on the platforms and get to the top. Though I do want to mention, I used Top Man's attack as the kind of final blow against him, and it just completely obliterated him. I don't know if my game glitched out or not, but still, as a set piece and as a conclusion to the game, it felt really epic and fun for me. Overall, I would say that this is a better final stretch of the game than Mega Man 1, but I would say Mega Man 2's castle is better if you don't factor in the turret room. The audio in Mega Man 3 is a standout, particularly the music. The music in this game is really amazing. The intro music, which doesn't have a cutscene to accompany it, has one of my all-time favorite video game songs. It really just gets me excited for this epic quest. The rest of the music in the game is really good. The boss fight music in particular adds a sense of kind of craziness to the fight. Overall, the soundtrack, I think, is less fondly remembered than other soundtracks in the series, but I don't think that means it's less good. I think it's a really good soundtrack. Lastly, considering the modern fun factor of this game, I want to touch on the ending. The ending of this game, I think, is really powerful. Proto Man rescues Mega Man while Dr. Wily's castle is collapsing and crumbling around them. The end has Mega Man wake up in Dr. Light's lab. The whistle sound reveals to Dr. Light that it was Proto Man who rescued Mega Man. And then Mega Man seems to beam out of there and is next seen running along a field. You get the sense that Mega Man is feeling somewhat overwhelmed or saddened by what's happened. Then there's a binder at the bottom of the screen, and the binder goes through the pages of these robot masters from Mega Man 1, showing what they were originally intended to be. This really adds a sense of weight to Mega Man's journey and how he has destroyed all these robots. It really adds a kind of sadness and a somberness to the end of this game. Lastly, it's revealed that Proto Man is Mega Man's brother. When you consider that Proto Man is showing up in these early levels and training you how to use the slide mechanic, you see that Proto Man was kind of looking out for Mega Man all along. It's a really cool, kind of poetic ending. Unless you consider that if you don't fight Proto Man correctly, he kills you, then it's a little bit confusing about what exactly he's doing. Overall, though, I think this is a really great ending for the game, and I really liked it. The modern fun factor for Mega Man 3 is really strong. Playing it today is still fun, it controls really well, the level design works, the power-ups are fun, the enemies are dynamic and interesting to fight, the music and the art direction of the game is beautiful and iconic. Overall, the game just works on every level for me. Now, considering the context in which Mega Man 3 exists, I think you also get more value for this game, particularly where you look at where it sits in the modern gaming context. Looking at 2D platforming games, big hits like Mega Man X, Symphony of the Night, and more recently Celeste use some sort of slide or dash mechanic. I can't find any other game in the platforming genre that took this step before Mega Man 3. I would say Mega Man 3 slid so those games could dash, and even though it's such an early version of the mechanic, it's incredibly well realized and fun. I also feel that this game is really underrepresented in the gaming media, particularly when people are nostalgic about the Nintendo Entertainment System. I felt like I was discovering something that most people don't really understand. And I'm shocked at how often people express their love for Mega Man 2, but don't seem to mention Mega Man 3 at all. Even myself, being someone who considers themselves a longtime fan of the Mega Man franchise, I had never played this game and I did not understand how good it really is. In the context of the series overall, I learned that this game was a big struggle for Keiji Inafune. I guess he had to rise up and fill the shoes of some people who wound up leaving Capcom during the project, and it was a really stressful, hard time for him. He's actually expressed that he dislikes the game, had a terrible time working on it, and thinks it's unfinished. It didn't feel unfinished to me, except maybe during the Mega Man clone battle near the end. Knowing that this game was a struggle actually kind of makes it more thematically appropriate to me. The storyline, at the end especially, is mysterious and dark and kind of sad. This fits with the struggle that Keiji Inafune has expressed about making this game. Also, the start of the game just instantly launches you into the title screen. And considering that there's no cutscene and the music just kind of kicks in with this like ready or not, here we go, it's Mega Man 3, also makes me feel like they worked on this game, they got it ready, they felt like it was good, and then just gave it out and it's ready to go, and you just play it, no intro, no fluff, you're just right into the game. And that really works for me considering the context of where the game sits historically. Now, considering my nostalgia and personal bias for the game, I have no real nostalgia for Mega Man 3. I didn't play it until I played it for this review. But considering my personal bias towards the Mega Man franchise at large, I love that this is the game where Rush, Proto Man, and the slide mechanic are all introduced. It feels like this is actually the first game in the Mega Man franchise where everything's kind of coming together and we really see the full picture of what Mega Man will be, besides the charge shot. Overall, I think that this game's really iconic, and I'm honestly surprised and shocked that I never played it. And one last thing when mentioning nostalgia, I do want to bring up Brental Floss's cover of the Mega Man 3 title song. I loved that song as a teenager, and I'd sing it with my friend, and I never really made the connection that it was in this game, so I guess that is a little bit of nostalgia I do have for Mega Man 3. Overall, I think Mega Man 3 is a great game. The modern fun factor is really strong with it. It's really fun to play, it's fun to look at, it's fun to listen to. The context of where it sits in video games history and how the design of platforming games has probably been influenced by it is really interesting, and I just really loved this game. I'm tempted to give it a 10 out of 10. I'll give it a 9 out of 10 just because the Mega Man clone battle is not very good, and those 4 levels that are the remixes of the previous levels are a low point for the game and are not particularly fun and maybe unbalanced challenge-wise. So overall, I'll give Mega Man 3 a 9 out of 10. I think it's a classic game. I think if you're a gamer, you gotta go find it, you gotta go play it, and you'll thank me for it. And I really am shocked that Mega Man 3 is not discussed more when people discuss classic games. I do also want to say thanks to everyone who's posted gameplay of Mega Man 3 online. I don't have a capture card yet for my Nintendo Switch, so I borrowed some footage. There's links in the descriptions below to see the original gameplay footages that I borrowed from. So thanks again for posting that. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe and stick around for more Mega Man content. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Bye.